everybody? Today I'm going to talk about my thoughts on various game controllers. Now if you're new here, Casino already in the bell, so I haven't really done a game console video in a while or anything like that. But I kinda wanted to do this today because I have a whole lot of controllers for various systems and I have a lot of thoughts on them and I kinda wanted to talk about it. So yeah, let's get started. So I have a lot of the retro game consoles and their controllers, but the first one I kinda want to start out with, since it's basically one of the first kind of big retro game consoles I got in, is the Atari 2600 controller. So I actually do like the Atari 2600 mostly because like you kind of have to use your imagination with it sometimes, because like it was like really the first big game console that really launched. I mean, there was the Magnavox Odyssey, but like Atari 2600 was the big one for a while. But this controller is not aged well at all. I think it's aged horribly. And the main reason is this joystick. I have 3 Atari 2600 controllers that don't work with the joystick. And when it does, it's just the freaking thing is so stiff. And this one's almost already about to come off. You can see like the wiggliness there. I really think that like the joystick is the main reason why it just has not aged well. I also kind of wish it had a suction cup to where like you can place it down and then play on it. I really don't like this controller anymore. And whenever I play Atari 2600 games, I usually use a Sega Genesis controller. And actually, because this is the same port as a Sega Genesis controller, which is nice. So like I much prefer doing a Sega Genesis controller. I almost never play with this one, but I mean, I do know that it did help create a lot of controllers in the future, but yeah, it's just not my favorite. And then the next one I have is an NES controller. So I actually really like this controller. Like, it's pretty good. It's like really the first game console that had a D-pad on its controller. I actually really like the D-pad. I really like all the buttons here too. Like the A and B buttons are really good, and select and start. The only thing is that some people say is kind of annoying with this controller is that it's aged a little bad because of like the fact that it's not rounded corners, but it hasn't really bothered me that much with like the square kind of look. And I think the reason why it doesn't bother me that much is because like while I do have some long gameplays I do occasionally, like even with that, like it doesn't really bother me that much. But I really like this controller still. So yeah. And then the next one I have is the Sega Genesis controller. One thing I actually do like about this controller way better than the NES controller is it's way more comfortable to hold this. I mean, the NES controller is still pretty good, but like I really love this rounded kind of design. Like there's the A, B, and C buttons. There's the start button and the D-pad. So, like, I also just really like how big it is. Like, it's kind of like a good type of bulky. With this, it's kind of like the perfect type of big, where, like, it's big to, like, fit in your hands and stuff. The only thing is, I don't have a 6-button controller version of this. The 6-button controllers are sometimes a little bit more cramped with, like, the kind of buttons closer to each other, and I've seen that at, like, various kind of game stores and stuff. But I've never really been interested in the 6-button controller, but I really like this 3-button kind of look. So yeah, I really like this controller. And then the next one I have is the Super Nintendo controller. So I feel like this was kind of Nintendo's response to like the rounded edges of the Sega Genesis controller, because this was coming around closer to the same time. This is actually one of my favorite controllers out of all of them. I really like how they added the shoulder buttons. You have the D-pad and the start and select, and then you have the 4 buttons here, which is very nice because like whenever I'm playing like Super Mario World or something like that, like I usually use the Y and then the B button to jump. That's usually what I do. Also, the only thing is that if you get mad at a game with this controller will not last. Like the NES controller is durable in that way, where like if you rage, like the NES controller will probably still work if you try to smash it or like throw it. But this is kind of a little bit more less durable. So like that's the only thing I can really complain about it, is that like it's a little bit more plasticky than the other one. But yeah, I just really like this controller still because like I really like those 4-button kind of like the right side and a D-pad. So, and then the next controller I have is the Nintendo 64 controller. So I know people hate this controller. And when I first held this Nintendo 64 controller, I did not like it at all. I feel like since I do have bigger hands, it's a little bit easier because like everyone kind of complains that like you don't really know where to hold the controller because it kind of has like this 3-prong look. I don't hate it as much as other people do. Like it's fine. The only thing is that really annoys me is that this joystick is terrible. Like, I mean, this is a aftermarket controller, and I do really like the orange color, but I hate this joystick. Like, this was back when, like, people did, like, plastic kind of for the joystick. It just feels so, like, it's gonna pop off any second. So, like, that's actually the only thing that really bothers me about this controller. Other than that, it's fine. It's really weird of a choice for all these buttons, but I've gotten used to it. But yeah, that's just joystick kind of sucks. And then the next one I have is the Duke controller. So with the Duke controller, this is the original controller that the Xbox came out with, or the original Xbox. People hate this controller, probably more than Nintendo 64 controller. But like, I honestly think it's a little overhated as well. Yeah, it is unnecessarily huge, but I don't think it's that bad. It might help because I'm gonna have bigger hands as well, but like, I don't think it's that terrible. Like, and this is actually kind of funny because like, back then, like, they still had memory card slots, even though you really didn't need them anymore. They already had the kind of their own saving kind of states for all these games. But the only thing that I don't like about this controller is the fact that the D-pad is bad. It's kind of like this weird kind of sunken in kind of version. Like, I really do not like this D-pad on this. I really don't mind most of it, but just that D-pad is kind of has like a mushy feel to it. Like, it just doesn't feel good on the hands. And yeah, so other than that, I think this controller is a little overhated. I mean, there have been kind of more recent kind of love for it with like a original Duke controller for the Xbox One, I think. They released one of that. But yeah, this controller is fine. I just hate the D-pad. So here is the actual superior version of it, in my opinion. This is the Xbox Controller S for the original Xbox. So this controller is way better. Like, even as a defender of the Duke controller, this controller is 10,000 times better. So this is kind of a little bit more similar to like an Xbox 360 controller, where it's like, it's smaller and it has a way better design. Like, the back and start buttons are on the side, and like you have these white and black buttons, and all this stuff is just way better. And like, I think this was originally a Japanese controller that was made for the original release of the Xbox, but they just transferred it over because people hated the Duke one so much. And the D-pad is way better here. Like, I really like this D-pad so much better. And the joysticks aren't different. They're basically the same joystick, because with that other one, the joysticks are different for some reason. I got this one actually at a garage sale with the garage sale haul I did almost last year. This green controller I actually like too, kind of like the Halo look. But yeah, this controller, I will say, is way better than the Duke controller, even though I'm a bit of a defender of the Duke controller. And then the next one I have is the GameCube controller. So, you would think that I would not really like this controller because, like, you might think it's a weird design at first, but, like, once you actually hold it and you just experience it, it's pretty good. Like, I really like most of these button choices. Like, you have the A button, which is actually like way bigger compared to the other buttons on like this side. It kind of all forms naturally. The only thing that I really don't like about this controller is two things. One, I kind of think it's weird that there's not this shoulder button on here, and also this yellow joystick, the C-stick, I think that's what it's called, is way too small. But other than that, I think this is a pretty good controller. Now, I have an aftermarket one for this one because the one I got from Japan when I got that GameCube, it doesn't work. So yeah, I really like this controller, even though the design might be weird. And the next controller I have is the Xbox 360. So this actually, no joke, this actually might be my favorite controller of all time. Like, people have had their praises about this controller. This is an off-brand one. This is Rock Candy. I've had this one for years. But like, everything about this controller is perfect in my opinion. Like, the shoulder buttons are good. Like, the trigger buttons are great. Like, the D-pad is way better than even in the original Xbox 360 controller. The D-pad kind of sucked. When the newer Xbox 360 came out without the red ring of death, that one really released a good controller. and like the joysticks are perfect. I just really love this controller. Like, I think this controller is the closest thing you can get to being flawless. Like, it's that good. So and also I occasionally use this on Xbox 360 and sometimes with games on my computer on Steam. So like, it's really good at that too. And this is a wired one. Like, in terms of like when you have to charge it, you have to plug it in instead of like batteries. But yeah, so this controller might actually be my favorite. And then the last one I have is the Wii Remote. So, the Wii was pretty much my first childhood game console. And yeah, so I actually have two versions of the controller. So, this is the original, this is the white color. I actually really like it, even though it's a bit kind of strange. Like, I really like it in terms of like, when it's a Wii motion controller. Like, I mean, the buttons are pretty decent, but like, people actually kind of thought this controller design was a little weird when it first came out because everything else was kind of like the Xbox 360 and the PS3. I like this controller pretty decently, but I have used it for when, like, I've used an emulator before called OpenEMU. It's like a Mac program. I would much rather use like a wireless NES controller compared to this, but when it's like you're swinging it around on like Wii Sports, it's pretty decent. It still holds up. So, and then I have another version of this controller, which is way better in my opinion, is the black Wii Remote Wii Motion Plus inside. This has improved kind of motion stability. So like, it's way more accurate with kind of the movements. This one I've had a little bit more accurate time with. Like, this is the one I normally use with the Wii that I have. So yeah, so I think this one's a little bit better. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. I know that like it's kind of a little bit of a repeat but I've done before, but I kind of wanted to talk about this today. So yeah, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.